Hi, it's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and I'm back with my plans and pans. Well, September 30th is the annual deadline that would mark when the United States Congress should pass a federal budget. That's next Saturday. The problem is that the majority party, the Republicans in the House of Representatives, have been absolutely unable to come to any agreement. The Republicans, unfortunately, are in utter chaos right now, have been unable to pass even a single bill, even had to send us home early this week because they didn't have votes. Kevin McCarthy thought he had the votes to move forward, and then two of the people who he was counting on, he said they lied to him, and so he did not have the votes, and we were just sent home. But it really looks like what we're seeing right now is a collapse of the proper operations of government by the Republicans, and we could be heading toward a shutdown. That means that much of government would stop, and I want to go through with you the things that don't stop and the things that do. But before I go there, I want to say it is not hopeless. We are expecting that perhaps the Senate, who has already passed all of the 12 appropriations bill, may send us what is called a continuing resolution. That is, that we would be able to, unfortunately, it would just be kind of kick the can down the road while we negotiate, while we work in a bipartisan way to get a plan that can keep the government functioning. So I'm hoping that there is still some room for negotiations. But I do want to tell you, here's what happens if there is a government shutdown. Well, first, the good news is that mandatory programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will continue to be funded. However, you should know that because that staffing levels for agencies like that are likely to not have sufficient staff, requests that are made for information to get answers to problems that you have may be halted. So I just want to encourage you, do call my office if you're running into problems like that. We'll try and answer questions you have, but understand that these agencies will be underfunded, except that the checks that you're expecting to come out will come out. The things that will not happen: essential workers, and that would include my staff and the staff of most agencies in government, will not get paid until after a shutdown is over. I just want to know I'm going to take care of my staff and make sure people can continue to pay the rent. But it's going to be very, very difficult. What you'll find, for example, that there will be serious backups at the airport. I talked to a TSA worker on my way to Washington last week. He remembers a shutdown before. It was pretty chaotic because of a lack of staffing of TSA workers at the airport. Passports may be halted, I'm afraid, in delivering those passports. If you have a moment now, make sure that you're trying to sign up before that happens. Head Start programs, can you believe it? We may see some of those programs actually not be able to provide the wonderful education for our little kids. And so that could have a bad impact on some families. We will find that inspections, we saw this in the last shutdown that we had, may stop. Inspections of the quality of drinking water and other things that the Environmental Protection Agency is in charge of doing inspections. Hazardous workers may not see that the agency called OSHA Occupational Safety and Health Administration may not be able to do those inspections. We know that the Small Business Administration will not be able to finish the applications that you are submitting. And the Department of Justice will postpone civil litigation. So in many different ways, families, individuals, businesses are really going to feel the impact if we go to a shutdown. I am hoping that in the next couple of days, we're going to be able to do something. And again, I want to say we're going to need some Republican votes in the House of Representatives. We did that before when there was almost a default in the government, but we were able to come to a bipartisan agreement. I'm hoping that that will happen. Meantime, we're seeing that the Republicans are in this terrible disarray and can't seem to agree on anything. Unfortunately, right now, the Republicans are holding this whole process hostage because they're making demands in order to keep the government open. For example, what they're saying, that they want steep cuts, big cuts in things like healthcare and Medicaid and education. In fact, one of the proposals was just to stop all federal funding for education. So the price that they're asking for at this moment has been much too high. Again, let's hope for sensibility and a compromise. I'm moving ahead with legislation that I think is absolutely critical, including a bill I introduced this week called the Future Generation Protection Act. It's all about an environment that our children and our grandchildren can thrive and survive in. The legislation phases out greenhouse gas emissions at power plants. It prevents hydraulic fracturing, and it would also phase out any exports of crude oil and natural gas around the world. I know this is a very ambitious piece of legislation, but the situation is so dire right now when it comes to our environment that we have to be visionaries and we have to put on the table those things that could really make a difference for future generations. That's why I introduced the legislation. I also introduced the ALS, Better Healthcare Act. ALS, as you know, is a deadly neurological disease, and the lifespan that's expected when someone is diagnosed with it is about 2 to 5 years. The good news is that progress is being made. There are now medications, there are treatments that are extending the life and improving the life of people that have ALS. And what my legislation does is make sure that ongoing care would be available to people who need it at little or no cost. The legislation is about hope. It is about continuing to explore all the ways that we can actually get a grip on this terrible disease. And so I am very anxious to see this legislation passed to make sure that any hope that is brought to the field of medicine and brought to ALS patients is available to all. In my office in Washington, I was able to meet with Beatrice Ponce de Leon, who is the Chicago Deputy Mayor for Immigration, Migrants, and Refugee Rights. So we were talking about what is happening in the Chicago area, certainly with all the migrants, and of course all the people who have been here for a long time who still don't have legal status in Chicago or in the 9th Congressional District or all across the country. But one of the things we're talking about is this mismatch right now between employers who want workers and workers, that would include immigrants and people who have been here for a while, who want to be able to be hired legally and work in the Chicago area. So we are asking the administration to help us by making sure that work availability, work permits are easier to get so that we are able to fill the need for employees. It was an important meeting. I was glad to meet her and impressed at the fact that Chicago is really, I believe, the only city right now that has a deputy mayor that's addressing these issues. This week, I still had the opportunity to travel around the district, particularly to the new parts of the district. I was so happy to be there with the Lake Zurich Chamber of Commerce. Yes, they were interested in what's going on in Washington. I did my best to explain what is happening and what might be happening, but I also was able to talk to them about ways that myself and all of my constituent advocates can do to help them, including securing funding. You should know that if you're representing a municipality, we do have the community project funding, and you can apply for that and we can help you get that. In addition to myself, there was State Representative Nabila Saeed, who's in her early 20s, doing a great job as a state representative in Springfield, and also with State Senator Dan McCarthy. So the three of us were answering questions that the Lake Zurich Chamber of Commerce had, and it's always a privilege to be able to go out and talk to those groups. It was held at a public library there, and one of the things I did tell them is that the library may become even more crowded if there were to be a government shutdown, and that's true for a lot of the not-for-profit organizations that may be called upon for additional help. Thanks to President Joe Biden and the infrastructure bill that passed, there is a program called the Affordable Internet Connectivity Program. Now, this is something that unfortunately in the 9th Congressional District, my district, only about 18% of people have taken advantage of it. Eligible households would be able to get a discount of up to $100 for a desktop computer, for a laptop, for a tablet, but you have to apply. So let me tell you how you do that. Go to getinternet.gov and they'll tell you how you can apply if you're eligible, and I would recommend you go ahead and do it. So that's the good news and the bad news. That's the plans and pans for this week, and I'll hopefully bring you some good news in the next week. See you then. Thank you for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where my handle is @Jan Schakowsky.